If this level Gareth is calling breaks, Bitcoin may be in deep trouble. August just started, but the charts show Bitcoin is still inside a bear flag pattern, most likely going down. And that's not all. Fear is spreading among retail investors who were expecting the approval of the BlackRock ETFs and some positive move that is not happening now. Some technical charts experts are even saying that a new crash may be upon us since Bitcoin failed to break the 31,000 level, and Gareth explains why.
I do, and again, at this stage, the regulatory hurdles for Bitcoin at least have been passed, right? We know that recently we heard that Coinbase was asked by the SEC before they filed the lawsuit to stop trading in everything but Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is in the clear for regulatory purposes. But what I'm fearful of, and this is what I think could drive it back down to 15,700 or even lower, is if you get a liquidity issue, right? If you get a issue where the stock market does drop 20 or 30%, that's where I would be very concerned about Bitcoin price holding up. And we've seen it be rejected at this 30 to 31,000 level multiple times. I wouldn't want to see it break 27,000 is this trend line right here. If that gives way, it opens the door, the trap door essentially for us to go back down. And I'll just show this chart here. Let's flip this into two charts here. We have Bitcoin on one side, and I want to bring up the NASDAQ on the other. If we look at the NASDAQ from the all-time highs, right? So here's the NASDAQ. The NASDAQ, I think, is about 10% off of the all-time highs. Bitcoin is massively off the all-time highs, right? We're talking more than 50% off of the all-time highs. And so the idea is if you had the NASDAQ just go back to the October lows, and that's that big of a drop, do we really think that Bitcoin is not going to at least retest that 15,700 level when it's only this small of a drop here? And so I would dare say that if you got a bigger corrective move, if we went into a deeper recession, I do think that Bitcoin could potentially go even as low as my lowest worst case scenario, 9 to 10,000 before bottoming and eventually turning up in a massive way. Well, it still looks like there's a correlation. It's just that unfortunately Bitcoin, the interest in Bitcoin has fallen dramatically and institutions are not stepping in versus over here, the NASDAQ clearly has been the recipient of so much money flow. So my fear is that with less interest in Bitcoin only driving it up this much versus where it was at the all-time highs and so much interest in stocks, if that were to reverse, do you see more panic hitting Bitcoin and driving it back to the lows? I mean, for all we know, maybe the NASDAQ only pulls back to 12.5, but Bitcoin just alone would then go back to the lows. So I think right now there's still a risk on, risk off correlation there with the stock market, but I do think eventually it changes and becomes the digital gold that we all hope it does. I just don't think we're there yet. People in the crypto industry are way too emotional for us to be back to be at digital gold yet. I would just say about that too is, interestingly enough, 2007's top on Bitcoin marked the futures launch of Bitcoin. 2021 marked the ETF on the futures, and then the BlackRock news this time on the ETF marked the short-term top. So it's interesting how these news events trigger tops versus what everyone is hoping for is the big breakout. Now, just to be clear, I think the ETF is going to be a game changer. It's going to be a validation of Bitcoin to most retail investors, even older retail investors that don't have any exposure. But I just don't necessarily see that as a short-term catalyst versus the potential for downside via the stock market.
So Gareth believes macro and stocks will end up performing poorly this year and end up dragging Bitcoin with them.
I think that's ultimately what will happen, which will then create the bottom for the next big bull run in Bitcoin.
When asked for his 5 years prediction, Gareth still shows bullish on this asset.
I think 5 years out, you're talking at least 150,000. So I think, and that could be low end. I really do believe long term that it is the answer. And I think eventually the Fed is going back to printing. Heck, we even saw the Bank of Japan, after they talked tough and said, we're not going to do anything, they intervened and actually bought bonds like a day after saying they were going to YCC it, lose the yield curve control. So the Fed will be forced to because of the U.S. debt, and that's the only way, is to print more money ultimately and kind of get things started. And that is ultimately the golden ticket for Bitcoin.
But despite that fact, in his most recent game plan uploaded today, he even went through the crash scenario again.
Bitcoin initially, all right, so we talked about this earlier, right? So if we look at yesterday, it was trading down here, okay? Trading down here. And what did we see happen? It rallied back and was right here, and then when the Fitch downgrade occurred, it popped. Overnight, it went higher. Look at how it got rejected, guys. See the line?
So this is support, 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 breaks support, retraces into what was formerly support. You know what that means? It's now resistance. Rejected, down it goes. That's a problem. All right, now you do have a level to trade against, though. Just to be honest with you guys, if you're a shorter term trader in crypto, this is your line in the sand. That low, 28.5, give or take. As long as price doesn't take that out, you could say, okay, that's a low pivot. This is a reversal, right? Now, if that gets taken out, you're going down to this line, which now slowly is upsloping more and more, getting closer. Now it's honestly close to 27,500.
If Bitcoin breaks this area, we can expect a 27,500 next, 25,000, and it can even go deeper until 15,000 if the Nasdaq or S&P drops. We all know by now that the crypto markets are dealing with a liquidity crisis due to the lack of clarity and regulation. Retail gets excited when prices are pumping, but big institutions want to get in when they know we won't see another FTX scam or issues with the US regulators. Apparently, Bitcoin is getting stronger than altcoins again. Gareth and Benjamin Cowan predict that the dominance is still increasing this year, but that alone is insufficient to ensure that Bitcoin goes up. It just means that altcoins are probably crashing even harder. You should watch this video next, where Ben also shows proof that a new low is coming before Bitcoin starts the next bull run.